welcome back to Food Prep Guide. We are continuing our pantry mix series today, and I'm especially excited about this one. It is my master bread dough mix. This is something that you can make one mixture of, prep several jars ahead of time, and use it to make all sorts of bread recipes. In this video today, we are going to be showing you how to turn that one mix into regular bread like that you could use for sandwiches, and then a pull-apart style garlic bread, which could easily be turned into a cheesy garlic bread just by adding cheese, and then a Parmesan herb breadsticks. Let's get started. Okay, we have 4 jars here. It's all going to be the same. It's just if I've got all the ingredients out, I may as well prep several ahead of time, which is kind of the whole point of having this dry mix on hand. So I'm going to be doing 4 today, and to start we need our flour, which is 3 1/4 cup of flour. 1, 2, 3 1/4. So 3 1/4 cup flour in every jar. Okay, all of our flour is done, so now we need our salt. We need 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt. You can use any kind of salt for this, but I do recommend that it's fine ground. So 1 1/2. I'm using pink Himalayan salt, which is usually my go-to salt for pretty much all of my baking. Redmond's real salt. Okay, and after this is 2 tablespoons of sugar. This is the Zolka cane sugar. It's not quite as processed as like a pure white type sugar. I've been using it for years and we love it. So I highly recommend it. I get it at Walmart, but I'm sure you can get it other places. But whoops, I just spilled all that sugar. Okay, 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Last but not least, last but not least, we only need 4 ingredients for this recipe. The last one is milk powder, powdered milk. I do recommend whole powdered milk. If y'all are friends of the channel, y'all have heard me talk about that so much. It really makes a difference in creaminess and flavor. But if instant milk is all you have, then by all means use that. Don't let that stop you from making this recipe. But if you can get your hands on some whole powdered milk, I highly recommend it. Our favorite brands before we had a freeze dryer. This is milk that we freeze dried ourselves. You can see it's kind of chunkier, kind of flakier, but that's okay. So home freeze dried, but also before we had a freeze dryer, and even still sometimes I buy it for convenience and quickness, is Hoosier Hill and Judy's. They both have a whole milk powder that is only one ingredient. It is just whole milk, no other additives. So I highly recommend those. I'll have those linked in the description box, but I'm putting 2 tablespoons of milk powder into each jar. 2, 1 and 2. And that is it, y'all. So I'm going to shake these down. And these absolutely can be vacuum sealed. I'm not going to be vacuum sealing them. I'm actually going to be making up several loaves for this video. I told y'all that I would show you how to actually turn these jars into something, so I'm actually going to be using 3 of them today. And this one will likely be used within the next month or so. I do vacuum seal things that are going to be, that I might not be using for 3 to 4 months. Then I would choose to vacuum seal. Okay, let's go ahead and show you how to make a basic sandwich bread loaf. Okay, I'm going to be making this in my bread machine today, but let's talk about that for a second, because we have gotten comments in the past before on any bread machine videos saying like, well, that's great, but I don't have a bread machine, so I can't use this recipe. And that is not the case. Nothing changes. Nothing about the recipe, nothing about the different steps or whatever. It's just the bread machine does the kneading for you and it does the baking for you. So if you don't have a bread machine, everything stays the same with the ingredients in your jar and the ingredients that you add. It just means you have to knead by hand, which is no big deal if that's what you're used to anyway. I went with a bread machine because it makes, if I have a bread machine and I have all these jar mixes on hand, it makes making, bread making, side dishes, all of that so much quicker. I can even have my youngest child, 9 years old, I can even have him do it. Y'all know, if you have seen our channel, y'all know that we do a lot of meal planning tips and videos, and y'all likely know that I recommend simplifying down your side dishes so that you can only plan your supper meals. It just helps reduce decision fatigue, it helps keep things simplified, and if you can simplify your side dishes down to just a few choices or a lot of choices but make them really easy, it just makes life so much easier, and that's what a bread machine does for me. I can have garlic bread, I can have breadsticks, I can have a loaf of bread, I can have potato-style dinner rolls, I can have crescent rolls, I can have pizza dough. I can have all of that ready extremely quickly. So I highly recommend a bread machine if you don't already have one. Okay, so we are going to add 1 1/4 cup of warm water. If you are kneading by hand, then you can go ahead and get out a mixing bowl and dump your jar mix in first, and then I'll add all the other ingredients. If you have a bread machine, you know that you have to put the liquid ingredients first, which is why we're doing it in this order. If you are hand kneading, the order doesn't matter. Okay, so 1 1/4 cup of warm water, and then we need 1 1/2 tablespoons of some kind of oil. We use avocado, olive oil, and coconut oil in our house, and I almost always go for the avocado oil or the coconut oil whenever I am bread making. So 1 1/2 tablespoons of oil of your choice and a half. And to that we will add our jar mix. Okay, and our last ingredient is going to be our yeast. 2 teaspoons of yeast. And in bread machines, it is recommended to make a little well, like a little hole in your flour for the yeast to go into. So I did that. And we're going to add 2 teaspoons of instant yeast, by the way. This is instant yeast. SAF brand is my favorite. But you can use any kind of instant yeast. You can even use regular dry yeast. You're just going to have to proof it first. But if you use dry yeast, you already know how to do that. Okay, that is it. We're going to plop this into the bread machine. And one of the beauties of a bread machine, like I said, is that you just push some buttons and let the machine do its thing. It will knead, it will bake, it will do everything it needs right inside here. Okay, so I'm going to choose, at this point, if you are using a bread machine, you know that you just need to choose whatever your settings are. My basic loaf of bread is number 1, which is already on number 1, so I just have to hit start and it is good to go. We'll show you what that looks like when it comes out. Okay, our bread machine bread is done. Here's what it looks like. Kind of lumpy. I did not shape it at all. I just let the bread machine do its thing. I want to cut into it so you can see what it looks like on the inside. There we go. You can definitely make a sandwich out of that. Give you a closer up look of how spongy it is. Nice and soft. Okay, so this is the first recipe that we make with our master mix. Now let's move on to recipe number 2. Okay, we are moving on to our pull apart garlic bread. Again, if you're using a bread maker, you want to go ahead and start with your liquids. If you're not, you can just pour it all into the mixing bowl in whatever order you prefer. But we need 1 1/4 cup of warm water. And then we need 2 tablespoons of butter. Now with a bread machine, you do not have to heat up the butter first. You don't have to melt it or soften it. But if you are going to be kneading by hand, I would recommend going ahead and at least softening the butter first. But I'm just going to cut out 2 tablespoons into 1 tablespoon portions and drop them in. And then we're ready for our mix. Just going to plop that right in there. And then we're going to top it with 2 teaspoons of yeast. I'm going to use my teaspoon to make a little well in the flour right here and put in 2 teaspoons. Now with this one, we're just going to use the bread maker on a dough cycle. If you are making this by hand, then you can just start mixing and kneading by hand. Now my bread machine does two kneading cycles. You certainly don't have to do that, but I think it just makes it really nice and fluffy and pliable. If you do want to do 2 kneading cycles, then you would knead for about 5 minutes and then let it rest for 20 minutes and then come back and knead it for another 5 minutes. And then you move on to letting it rise. But we are just going to run the dough cycle, and then all the rest we're going to be shaping and adding the garlic and all of that and baking in our oven. So we'll be back when the dough cycle is done on this bread machine. Okay, our dough cycle is done. Here's what it looks like. So we're going to roll it out as if we were making cinnamon rolls. So I'm going to slightly flour my surface here. Keep some extra on hand just in case. Pull this out. Trying not to pull get the thing stuck in the dough. Okay, this is pretty sticky, so I'm going to put a little bit of flour on top. Okay, so we're just going to roll it out just as if we were making some cinnamon rolls. First, I'm going to try to get it to where it won't stick to my counter too bad. Okay. Okay, here's our rectangle. So now we're going to make our garlic butter mixture. And what we need is 1/2 cup of softened butter. I just stuck a stick of butter, which is 1/2 cup in case you didn't know. And I just stuck it in my oven with the oven light on while the bread dough is going. And now it's nice and soft. Into that, we are going to add, let me wash my hands real quick. Okay, so to that we are going to add 2 tablespoons of minced garlic. You can certainly use fresh garlic. I'm using my freeze-dried minced garlic for this. Definitely not going to skimp on the garlic since this is a garlic bread. So I kind of did some heaping tablespoons. Okay, and then 1/2 a tablespoon of Italian seasoning. So I'm just going to use my tablespoon and do about 1/2. And that's all for our mixture. Now, if you would like to make this a cheesy garlic bread, then you can mix on some, or shred some cheese on the top of this butter. If you would like to make a cheesy garlic bread. Sometimes we do that, and it comes out really great. Tonight, I'm just going to keep it plain garlic bread. So let me get this stirred up real quick, and then we'll spread it out. Okay, here's what that garlic butter looks like with just a little bit of Italian seasoning in it. Now we're just going to spread it onto our dough. I'm going to leave just a little bit of room on the edges, just as if you were doing some cinnamon rolls or jelly rolls, leaving the edges free for rolling up in just a minute. And even though I'm making pull-apart bread, because it's just we just really like that style, you can use this same dough and this same recipe of, you know, butter, garlic, and Italian seasoning to make breadsticks, to make rolls, to make those bread like spiral twists. It all depends on this step, what you want to do with the dough. So use your imagination and do whatever you and your family like best. This recipe really is, it can be turned into several different things. Okay, let me get this moved away. Now this next part is a little bit tricky. I need to put this in a loaf pan, so I'm actually gonna use my butter wrapper to grease the loaf pan, and I'll show you what I mean by being a little bit tricky. Okay, I'm going to use my extra long Pullman loaf pan that I use for our sandwich bread. Whenever I'm making that in the oven, it just gives a nice long square loaf, but I like to use it for this recipe too. So we're gonna roll it up and cut it just like cinnamon rolls. The tricky part comes into how we get it into our pan, because we have to cut it before we put it in the pan. That's what gives us our pull apart style. And then I'm just going to take the edges here and stretch them up and over and try to pinch the sides down, just to kind of hold in all that garlic butter. And then I'm going to scrunch it until it's about the width of my loaf pan. So I got my loaf pan here. I'm kind of measuring with my hands to kind of scrunch it. And you can make this scrunch no matter what size your loaf pan is. You don't have to have this particular size loaf pan. You just scrunch the dough. Obviously, the shorter the pan, the higher and bigger your individual pieces of this bread is going to be. Okay, so now we're just going to cut them into slices. This is, again, ever how much you want the size to be. I generally aim for 1.5 to 2 inch of, width on my slices. But we need to keep them in the line, like all in a row here, because the tricky part is lifting them up and getting them into our loaf pan without dropping any pieces. Okay, here we go. Sticking on the bottom, I'm just going to make it even harder for me to pick up. Okay. Okay, there we go. Here's how it looks in the pan. We are going to, let me center it in the pan. Now we need to let this sit in a warm spot and rise for about 40 minutes. I always just do it in my oven with the oven light on, but the oven not on. So rise for 40 minutes, and towards the end of when the 40 minutes is going to be up, we want to go ahead and preheat our oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. It's been about 40 minutes, so I preheated the oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Here's what the bread looks once it has risen. Nice and proofed. So now we're going to bake it for 35 minutes or until golden brown. Okay, here it is. I just pulled it out of the oven and I rubbed some butter on the top. Let's cut into it so you can see what the inside looks like. Okay, since this is pull-apart bread, I'm going to try to just simply pull it apart. Let's see how, oh yeah, okay, good. Pull it apart good. Here's how the inside looks. It's still pretty hot, but you can see where the piece wants to naturally pull apart like that. Here's another one. Trying to hold it up, but it's really hot. But you can see the butter and the garlic kind of mixed into there. It smells really good. This is just a quick and easy side dish to pair with any meal. Okay, let's move on to recipe number 3. Okay, our third and final recipe is a Parmesan herbed breadsticks. So we're going to do this in our bread maker again, but again, you can do this in a mixing bowl and it won't matter what order you do it in, and you'll just have to hand knead it, just knead it by hand. It does matter what order you put it in the bread machine. So we're going to start with 1 1/4 cup of warm water. And to that we will add 1 1/2 tablespoons of oil. I'm going to be using avocado oil today. But you can use whatever kind of oil you like. We need 1 1/2 tablespoons. Okay, I need to use a tablespoon for the rest, so I'm going to dry this off real quick. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our seasonings. We need 3 tablespoons of Italian blend. This has like oregano and basil, a few other spices in there. So 1, 2, and 3. That kind of seems like a lot, but this is a 2-pound loaf. And it's not really a loaf for making breadsticks, but it's a 2-pound dough, which is a lot. So 3 tablespoons of Italian seasoning. Then we're going to do 1 tablespoon of garlic powder. I'm going to be using my freeze-dried minced garlic, so I'm going to be actually doing a little bit less than that because this isn't in powdered form. So you have options there. You don't have to use garlic powder. You could use minced garlic as well. Just decrease the amount just a little bit. Okay, and then our last seasoning is going to be 1 teaspoon of onion powder. 1 teaspoon of onion powder. And then we're just going to dump in our master dough jar. And then we need our yeast. I'm going to use my teaspoon here to make a little well in the dough. And we need 2 teaspoons of yeast. And this is the SAF instant yeast. I've heard many people say that you have to use bread machine yeast. I have never used bread machine yeast. So take that with a grain of salt. Okay, that is it. I was about to tip it over and show you, but that would mess things up. So I'm going to put this in my bread machine and click the dough cycle. We only need it to make our dough for us. Bread machines tend to do 2 rest periods. If you're kneading by hand, you do what you are used to doing when you are bread making. Mix it all together, knead it for about 5 minutes, let it rest for 10 or 15 minutes, and if you want to do a second knead, go ahead and do a second knead. It will give you a much softer bread dough. So we'll be back when the dough is done. Okay, the dough cycle is done. Here's what our dough looks like, and it smells wonderful. I've got my surface floured here, so I'm just going to take the dough out, and we are going to roll it out into a rectangle, just like we did with the garlic bread, and just like you would do with cinnamon rolls. Forgot to get my rolling pin out. Here it is. And as far as what size rectangle, it's going to depend on how many breadsticks you want and how long you want them to be. So just kind of judge based on that. I'm just kind of trying to do a shape that matches how tall or long I want my breadsticks to be. Personally, I don't care about them being perfect, so this is by no means going to be a perfectly shaped breadsticks. Let's see if I can get more of an edge here. And here. Okay, I'm going to call that good. So at this point, you want to slice them into about 1 inch thickness. I'm just going to be eyeballing that. Okay, and just off camera here, I have a slightly greased baking sheet. I'm just gonna plop those on. And we need to let these rise. I've got my oven light turned on inside my oven. That's where I always make things rise, but you can put it in a warm spot, whether it's a sunny windowsill. I know a lot of people do it on top of their freezer. I'm actually running my dehydrator right now, so a good spot would be right on top of my dehydrator. Anyone who dehydrates, y'all know it gets nice and toasty in there. I am out of room. Let's see if I can put this one right there at the top. Okay, so we are going to let these rise in a warm spot for about 20 minutes. Okay, here they are risen. I've preheated my oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and I have melted 3 tablespoons of butter. So now we're just going to brush the melted butter onto the breadsticks, being really generous with it. You can certainly do more than 3 tablespoons if you like, but 3 tablespoons seems to be a decent amount. After that, we need to top them with some Parmesan cheese. Now, ideally, you're going to have fresh grated Parmesan cheese. I do not have that, so I have to use what is second best, but it is much better with fresh Parmesan cheese. I just need to use what I have. And that is it. So we are going to bake this in a 400 degree preheated oven for about 15 minutes. Okay, here they are, fresh out of the oven. They've been cooling for about 10 minutes. So let me tear apart one of these, show you what they look like. You can see all the herbs mixed in there. Of course, the butter and Parmesan on top. Some good, quick breadsticks. Okay, y'all, that wraps up this video. Don't forget to enter the Mix in Jars giveaway if you haven't already. The link is in the description box. We'll see y'all next time. Bye.